Hello and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Leo. This is part of my 29 Days of Magic series, where I interview an awesome Black woman every single day for 29 straight days. And today, I am beyond thrilled to have the wonderful, magic, the enchanting, the fantastic Kai Deveraux Lawson, who is the founder of My Uncle Kai and the award-winning Mixed Company podcast on the show. Kai's amazing. I love her dearly. Super happy to have her on the podcast. So take a listen to her incredible story. Hi, Kai.
Hello, and thank you so much for that introduction. That was wonderful. Makes me want to meet myself.
That's hey, listen, that's kind of the plan here to kind of sell you in deeply with the group. And also, this is a reverse. I feel like I've done.
That's true. That is true. That's just, so we are paying it forward here. We are bartering guest spots on podcasts.
Yes, ma'am. So, first question always is intriguing, and I'm very intrigued what your answer is going to be for this one. So, Kai, what was your first job?
Ever in life, right? Or just like
Whatever you feel like saying.
I think my first job ever, really funny for me. I worked at the rectory of my church growing up.
I just know that.
I worked at the rectory. I was the first I worked at St. Agnes Church. They gave me an actual wage and I thought I was well off to being a businesswoman. And before that, I hired myself as a little kid and I used to sell tester perfumes to kids in my second grade class who were getting bad grades so that when they had to break the news about a bad test or something, they had like perfume to give their moms. I've been out here hustling for a long time.
Oh my God. Um, I one okay. Before I get to the rectory story, how is it you at 8 to 9 years old,
Hmm.
one had possession of so many samples of perfume,
Hmm.
two knew how to monetize that, and three you found a customer base with a very specific niche?
Yeah, I know, right? It's when you put it like that, I'm genius, and I should write a book about that.
You
No.
should.
Well, my mother actually, for a long time, worked at the cosmetic counter for Elizabeth Arden. And so that was kind of my entry into what it looked like to, be entrepreneurial, have a job. She was also a makeup artist. And so she would, consult a lot of her services out. So because I was behind that cosmetic counter for much of my days between school holidays and whenever daycare was not available, she would give me the testers. And so we just had testers at home. And I remember one day I think I might have had some in my book bag. I don't know why, but somebody asked if they could give me a quarter for one of the testers. And I was like, oh, I could do this for everybody. And I made up the story that like you can give this to your mom and she won't be as mad at you when you get a bad grade or you get in trouble at school. And I was bringing home like 10, $15 a week out here slanging perfume testers.
Wow. Okay. I mean, the level of entrepreneurship that is there is pretty impactful. As well as the ingenuity to like find that very specific customer base with a great marketing hook. I mean, honestly, you what we always tell clients, find your why. You found their
I
why.
had a real why. It was brilliant, actually.
That's amazing. Oh my God. Okay. So then explain to me how you get to a rectory. Like, and where was this? What's St. Agnes?
This is all in the same school. So I grew up I was born and raised in Westchester, Pennsylvania, so about 30, 45 minutes depending on who's driving outside of Philadelphia. And I was raised Catholic, so St. Agnes School was the Catholic school my brother and I went to growing up. And St. Agnes Church was the church we received all of our sacraments at, and that we went there for actual elementary and middle school schooling. And so part of the rectory, at the church, like is the business office. So any other church that you go to, any other denomination, You usually have an office, a main office, a business office. Ours specifically is called the rectory. And so I was the weekend front desk girl at the rectory for St. Agnes Church in Westchester, Pennsylvania, way, way, way back in the day, pulling in money so I could put minutes on my phone and buy nice white sneakers. It was great.
Wow. Oh, that is again unreal. But also, no, being that I know you, I'm surprised.
Don't be surprised. Yeah, I was like, it all makes sense in the end of the story, right?
Yeah, totally does. And I also I also was raised Catholic, and I also went to St. Agnes School. Yeah, I was like,
That's so, look at the connections here. All of the dots that connect. I love it.
yeah. I went to St. Agnes in Rockville Center on Long Island.
Oh, yeah, down the street from me now. Look at that.
Look at that. Yeah, that school was interesting.
So was mine. Makes sense. It all makes sense.
It all makes sense. Um, okay, so from being a bad bitch at the rectory to now, clearly you had quite the career journey. So how did we get to be having this conversation?
We got to have this conversation completely by accident because I had no intention of ever getting into advertising, and I tell the story often. I just knew that I was going to end up in the music industry. And I just knew because, I had done some street team opportunities when I was in high school. My cousins did street team for Rockefeller Records back in like right before Kanye's first album came out. So the campaign that they were helping to promote was the Get Well Soon Kanye. And so I was in New York for that summer and hung out with them, handing out CDs, handing out flyers, getting people excited about the VMAs that summer. And I just knew that this was going to be the business that I ended up in. And so I interned all the way from like 15 years old through college. And I was like, oh, entertainment's cool, but those advertising kids over there, they're so weird. And advertising is only for people who can't get into entertainment. And so the way the universe works, right? I was right. And I didn't make it into entertainment largely because when I graduated from college, shout out to Howard University, it was the last recession, the last really big recession that we had. And so when I got to my aunt's house, because I was like, I don't expect to get a job for a while, I got a call from this really nice man who was like, hey, my name is such and such. I can't remember his name. I do HR here at Wonderman. So this is when Wonderman was just Wonderman, not Wonderman XYZ, WHYY, all of that. And we have an open role for a junior project manager. Are you interested in interviewing? And I was like, hell yeah, a manager right out of college. Obviously, they know how brilliant I am.
Mm-hmm.
Had no clue what project management was, but ended up getting the job within 3 days. So within the week of graduating college, I found my way. I stumbled and tumbled my way into advertising, which is why we are here today. This is how we got to this conversation today.
Wow. So once you wandered in as a like baby shot caller, how did that go?
Oh, it was awful. Oh my God. I don't actually believe that I was that bad, but my experience, I didn't know anything about this business. And so coming in as a junior project manager, the level of detail that is required as a project manager, specifically, I was working on a financial services client, and much of my work required me to read terms and conditions. First of all, I needed glasses. That's first of all, and I didn't realize it at the time. Second of all, I you don't know how to be as detailed as you need to be unless you are put into the situation. Like I believe some of us have to learn how to be as detailed that the job requires. And so, my first couple months, I remember there was this man in the studio and he hated my guts. And a good friend of mine that I worked with, she was actually my supervisor at the time, but a good friend of mine reminded me about this the other day. He made my life a living hell for the first year in my career. Like he just thought I was ditzy and I couldn't fit the bill, and he didn't know why they would put me on his projects. And so it wasn't that great, but I had some help. I met some really amazing people that you and I both know and have relationships with, and ended up getting really good, I guess, at reading terms and conditions, and moved on up to an account executive, and moved up to, went on to work at a few other agencies, and started to realize that, like, okay, there's a way to present yourself here. There is a way to do this work. And so trial by fire was definitely the theme of my first few years in the industry. And then, you catch the hang of these things.
That's actually what you figure. So you figure it out along the way, and you make it happen. So I do wish I didn't do that. I don't remember when we actually first met, but I always was like, yeah, Kai, that one. Yeah. But along the way, you've had a whole bunch of host of just brilliant things that you've done, and we talked about a lot how D&I is heavily under attack,
Mm.
and how we can actually be smart about this in this moment because you know white lash is real, and
Mm.
which is we're in it undergoing over the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Someone got mad because the white black man was president.
Mm.
Like for people who are marketers, because I think this is also kind of what we've talked about in the past. Like it is the marketing side of the house that people have to get in order for this to be smarter and better and more impactful.
Mm-hmm.
How
Yep.
do you, how do you figure it out?
I think it's a good question, right? And I heard you chuckle when you said DEI under attack. I think that's accurate. I think DEI has always been under attack. I think the concept of acknowledging people and giving them or acknowledging them within the value that they deserve has always been under attack, right? I think when people think about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and any other letters you want to add on to it, a lot of people like it to feel like it's the feel good thing to do, that this is like the charity thing to do. A lot of people who work in diversity and inclusion will tell you that their colleagues like to treat them like they are the party throwers and the charity givers. And that is absolutely not what this is. What it is marketing best practice behaviors for how to not be a shit human, if we're honest. It's marketing best practices for how to behave with your colleagues, how to engage with your consumers, and how to set standards for engagement that are really rooted in respect and acknowledgement, right? And so when you say how do you do this, and how do you make it work in the context of marketing, it's really about knowing and respecting your audiences, whether that's an audience that we're creating a large campaign for, or an audience that we're trying to hire into a company, an audience that we're trying to retain within a company, right? It's really about knowing them, acknowledging them, and meeting them where they're at respectfully. And when you work from that mindset, at least I believe, that is how you're able to tackle solutions that create more equitable spaces. The challenge is there are a lot of roadblocks in there because, I had the pleasure of speaking at the AMA, the American Marketing Association pre-conference for diversity and inclusion this weekend, or this week rather. And one of the things that one of the researchers talked about was the theory of the overall theory, I think it was, of like social dominance. And yes, the social dominance theory. I had to look at my notes. And essentially what that is there are people in this world that really believe that there should be structure that designates who is more important than others, who is important, who is on top, who is in charge, and also designates that who is the least desirable, who is the weakest, who is the punching bag, essentially. And because there are people and ideals and systems and socializations that believe that there are people who do not deserve equitable respect as a high valued person, if you will, that really interferes with how we approach marketing. It interferes with how we approach engaging with our colleagues, and it really affects how people engage when they walk out into the world. So I think that those are some things that become the consistent themes across DEI is the challenges. When you hear people say on I'll call it the more vocal side, like some people just don't care. Yes, there are some people that really just don't care about DEI, and there are also people where it's not that cut and dry. But there are actually people out there also who are genuinely committed and who are genuinely open to changing policy and who are genuinely open to opening their budgets to make sure that things happen in an equitable manner. We just don't see a lot of those people rise to the top. And so it's few and far in between where we're able to partner and make things happen.
I think that's the challenge that we're in right now, where it's like the folks who know what you're talking about are not rising to the top, or they're there for a bit and then they're like, you know what, good luck, we're good, we're good now, we're done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how do you think we have to combat that? Because I think,
Yeah.
as we see at the moments right now, lots of folks have changed jobs, lots of folks have rolled back their commitments. I saw a stat but the number of like marketing emails for Black History Month is down like 40% in 20.
Yeah, they cured racism back in 2020, apparently. That's what I heard.
And it's but also you're not looking at the numbers because the country is getting browner and browner. So there is a business imperative for you to get your shit together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there is a business imperative, but we also have to look at like who makes the decisions, and it's not always the CEO of a company. I think, when we had our great awakening, if you will, in 2020, when there were so many people who found the light so much that they added the Black square to their timelines, or they donated to Black Lives Matter, and they hired their diversity consultants and so on and so forth. There were so many people who were able to mask as true allies, honestly, that only time can reveal who's really, on the side of what we believe to be right in the context of diversity and inclusion. And so I think the way forward will always be, yes, patience, but also persistence and accountability. And I think that that's where myself and other leaders tend to diverge in how we approach this. I think the only way to make things happen is to hold people accountable out loud. Because when we give people, because it's not just businesses, right? Like we can't look at it like the structure of a business. You have to hold individuals accountable. And yes, that can be your CEO, but that also has to be your middle manager. Most middle managers are responsible for why people leave their jobs. And so if we're talking about, talent on the talent front, we're looking at HR people, talent acquisition people, and who are not always the same person. In smaller places they are. We're talking about hiring managers. We're also talking about team leaders. We're talking about people who are forced in positions where they get to decide who gets a raise and who doesn't, or who gets the whatever indicator your company uses. Like those people are responsible and need to be held accountable for enforcing or candidly negating DE&I efforts. Also, on the external side of marketing, there are people who are not a CEO and who are not a chief marketing officer, but who are in charge of deciding what vendors you want to use, who are in charge of deciding what kind of talent you use. Even on the media side, there are not high profile people who are individually responsible for creating media plans that determine what kind of content gets placed in what channels and how much money gets spent in what mediums. And I think holding those people accountable, while very dangerous for many of us, and I can tell you tons of stories about that, is going to be most important, because it does force people to realize, just because you join a Facebook group for allyship, and just because you attended a couple of BRG events at your company, you are not actively helping to solve for challenges that exist within the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion if you yourself are not making deliberate choices to empower people who are underrepresented and purposefully marginalized.
You just say a word, my darling, because it is fully what's necessary. And thinking about that in the context of the world we live in and where we are today, talk to me about a time that you had a challenge where you're like, no way I'm gonna sort this out.
No way am I gonna sort this out, and I did. I feel like that might just be the theme of my life. Is like there's lots of David and Goliath moments. I think, dang, Laura, that's a really good question. And and the reason I'm struggling is because it's like, do I tell you about what's going on now? Do I tell you about a moment? I think I'll start by saying this, right? One of the things that I recognize is that things will always work out, period, right? And everybody says that, and it seems a lot nicer than it is, but it is not. And so I'll give this example. I'll give the recent example because I think that this might resonate with other people in an important way. I had a really crazy ass year last year, as you know. And so for other people listening, personally, 2023 tried to take me out. 2023 tried to stone cold stun me like it was a 1998 Monday Night Raw WWF wrestling match. And when I say that, I mean that I experienced loss beyond what I like. If there were money I could bet on how much personal loss of people that I loved, cared for, and adored in my life, I would never have bet that the extent of loss I experienced would have happened. You know, one was a miscarriage that I shared with people, and within 7 weeks, my brother passed away. And within 3 weeks of that, I was actually let go from Dentsu, and it was told to me it was because of restructuring, whatever, right? And that's just 3 of the losses of a very long year where there was much loss, right? And so one of the things that I was thinking, I remember when my brother had passed and it was just like a back-to-back of losses, I felt like, you know, I don't know how I'm going to be able to lead, right? My heart is broken. I am a shell of myself. I was very scared and nervous about candidly going back to work and having to emotionally be available for other people who needed me to be emotionally available for them. You know, politics in itself was starting to get really tense. There's a lot happening on the news. People are feeling left out. People are worried about their jobs. And a lot of the way I built my role to be an effective inclusion leader, I built my role in a way that I was actively, proactively, physically, emotionally, and spiritually there for my stakeholders, for the people within my service line. And I was terrified about what that looks like to have to go back to work. And I was also starting to think about, well, what does a new career look like? Because I don't know if emotionally I can continue to engage in the context of diversity and inclusion as a leader, knowing what I know now, what we all know now about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is everybody who started out saying that they were an ally is absolutely not an ally. There are maybe a quarter of folks who started out very strong on the topic of DE&I in 2020 are still as committed to it because of all of the headwinds, if you will, financially, politically, whatever. And I was having a lot of anxiety about that. And I think how it worked out for me is because, within that additional loss of my job, which is very scary when, you're in the midst of paying funeral bills and all of these things, what it did and what it has done and what I will absolutely scream from the mountaintops, the blessing in it, even though, there is absolutely fear, is it freed up time for me to grieve. It also freed up time for me to figure out what my next move. It also gave me opportunity to get back to my podcast, which is, where I was getting the most love, if you will, or feeling the most love in the work that I was doing, and allowed me space to just kind of be where I needed to be without having to be there for other people. And so I shared that story because I know that there are a lot of people going through the layoff thing right now, and a lot of people have been for the last couple years. But that was a moment where that was a challenge to how can I do everything at the same time? And the universe was like, don't you worry about it, girl. We're gonna take care of it. And the universe did. As much as it sucked, it really did set me up for something even better.
Awesome. And one, I adore you. Thank you for sharing that. I know that that was not easy. And yeah, you're right. It's when you have those moments of like, you've got to be fucking kidding me.
Mm-hmm.
But it does.
No, we
There's,
was cussing. I was also stuttering because I didn't know I could cuss. So now I know.
oh yeah, you can totally guys.
I'm trying to find adult words.
Oh, you could have totally
Good.
get one out if you need to.
I will. I
but,
will.
um, but yeah, it is so hard sometimes, and I think oftentimes, especially as Black women, we put
Yep.
that on our back, we add another back on our back, and like, oh, we'll just figure it out and it'll be okay. Versus taking a step to breathe and look at and find out what the message is in all of this mess.
Exactly. And to really give yourself, it's, I can only speak from the perspective of a Black woman of color, and all of the other identities I share. But when we talk about challenge, one of the biggest challenges is figuring out how are we as individuals, and I say that globally across any identity. How am I as an individual going to change this situation? And the reality is sometimes the situation has to change you. It's not for you to stress about and get anxiety about and get IBS and whatever other symptoms you get when you're anxious, but like it will work out. Not the way you thought it would, and not the way you may have expected it to or dreamed about, but it will still work out with a positive. Even if it's a negative situation, it will still work out with some sense of positivity.
It always does in some way, shape, or form. And I always say that the good people do it. And obviously, you're one of the best.
Mm-hmm.
So, looking back on everything that's happened in your amazing career and life, what do you think you'd tell 18-year-old Kai?
Mm. Girl, wear more bikinis. That's the first thing I probably would say.
Yeah.
That's just, you think you're thick now, girl. Wait for 15 more years. No, in addition to telling 18-year-old Kai that, I would hug her, and I first would thank her because I think 18-year-old Kai set me up so well for 35-year-old Kai to be able to have this conversation with you today, Laura. I think 18-year-old Kai was really trying to set herself up for success. And I recognize in the retrospect that it's the success that I have. What I would tell her to do, which kind of is in the vein of wear more bikinis, wear your stomach out more, girl. You was cute. Is to take more pictures and to live in the moment more. I have all of these really awesome stories about people I've met, conversations I've had, really cool things that I've done. Like I said, I did a lot of work in the entertainment industry from the time I was like 15 years old till I graduated college. And even now and again, I dabble in and out of it. But I didn't take any pictures. And I didn't take any pictures, and I didn't stay in the moment. And it was, on one hand, I was like, I'm not trying to seem like a groupie. But on the other hand, it was like, I'm not trying to seem like a groupie because I got so much shit to do. I need to figure out how to get to the next step. And I don't think I took the time to appreciate the amazing opportunities that I had. I think I may have been slightly over ambitious, and that ambition leaves me with cloudy memories of really bomb ass moments without having like the souvenirs from them. And so I wish I took pictures. I remember I did a concert. I worked on the homecoming committee when I was at Howard University, and I produced a live concert for about 50,000 people, something like that, on campus. I brought Nipsey Hussle to campus.
What?
I brought Big Sean to campus. I hung around. I brought the clips to campus, and I was hanging out with Pusha T and his brother Malice and giving them a tour of campus and talking about where I want to be in life and like how cool it is, like how cool Virginia is. And I after that I recorded a record with Grandmaster Flash, and I've done some really dope things, Laura, and I have no pictures because I was just figuring out, how do I turn this into a job, a career, into a success story? And I think that there are a lot of people like that who might be ashamed to appreciate the moment because they're focusing on the future. And I would just wish I could tell her, like, hey, girl, we are real sad. We don't have no videos. We don't have no pictures. We don't have nothing because you might have worked a little too hard, and it's okay to play sometimes.
I think that's the most important thing. It's okay to play sometimes.
It's okay. It's okay to play.
I mean, I totally get the like imbalance of it all. But like, you want to be serious, want to be taken seriously, but you're like, oh no, look what it is.
I worked with J. Cole twice. This is a story. I did concerts for J. Cole twice, right? Had like long conversations, mad cool, so much so. And I did this with another friend of mine. Shout out to Shaquana Ford. I did this with Shaquana, and she saw him in an airport maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. And he was like, oh, I remember you. And you worked with the other girl. What was her name too? And I was like,
Oh,
if only I had pictures. I don't have any pictures because I was just hustling so hard.
All right, well, but it also means that like that will come back around again, so that you can record those moments, or they will be supplanted by moments that you will learn to take on this stuff. But also, girl, well, I used to work in the fashion industry. I could not take pictures, so it's in my brain like it was yesterday. After about Baby Fat one day, I'll tell you.
Good times.
Good times. But saying how similarly how you talked about being in the moment, especially what you so candidly and beautifully shared. What do you do for time now? What do you do for your self care?
For my self care, especially this side of 2023. In 2024, my self care has been to really sit in silence, Laura. Like, very rarely do I even turn on the TV. And it's not because I don't like TV. I love TV. I love anything that'll numb my mind. I love anything that'll like take my mind off of like work or anxiety. But I sit in silence because I'm not a good meditator. And I find that sitting in silence is the closest I can get to clearing my mind. And it doesn't feel as forceful. I also do everything I can to spend time with people that I care about, even if it's for a couple seconds on a FaceTime. And I do that as self-care for me because while I don't necessarily like to be in big crowds all the time, I do recognize on this side of everything I've experienced that like I get my energy A from being alone, but B from one-on-one time with people I really, really, really fuck with. Like, I respect you, I love you, I want to be like you, I just think you're great. Maybe you smell good, and so if I can't make it to Sephora, maybe I'll just sit next to somebody to smell their cologne, whatever. I make it a point to have that one-on-one interaction with people when I can, because what I know now is you don't get those moments back. And so to take care of me, it's making those moments and making them count.
Absolutely.
Silence and one-on-one time with cool people.
Exactly. And have the oysters.
Always. And the champagne and the
Yeah.
fried chicken too if it's on the menu. Yep.
Oh my God. You were so right. Always the fried chicken and the fries. Um, Last question for you. Do you have a give and or ask of the audience?
Yeah, I have an ask.
Go for it.
I have an ask. My ask of the audience, because I like I said, I've had some really, after having a really rough year, I do have some really great stuff in the works and on the way that I'm just not necessarily announcing it. So my ask, because I intend to have really big news to share, or a few bouts of big news to share within the coming months. If you can hear the sound of my voice and you like what you hear, my ask is to just kind of follow me on social media. You can read my blog in the meantime, mylifeofkai.com. You can listen to the podcast, Mixed Company Podcast. You can all find this on my social media channels at My Life of Kai. So it's literally MY Life of Kai. And yes, I did steal that from the movie Life of Pi. I just thought it sounded better.
It
But
does.
to follow me, because as I start releasing news about the things that I've been working on and fun things that I'm getting into and ways that I'd like to engage people, I would love the listeners here to be a part of that. And so I release all news about myself because I'm not a celebrity on my personal social media channels. So to hear about it, you got to be there to see it. And so that's LinkedIn, that is Instagram, that is, I guess I'm on X too, the platform, not the drug. TikTok, whatever, it's My Life of Kai. Just follow me because there will be some really cool ways that I'd love to engage your audience. And you got to hear me out to be down for that.
Awesome. I mean, obviously, we're gonna put all the details in show notes for folks to follow you on all the channels, as well as just keep and connecting with you because again, those one-on-one moments mean the world. So Kai, I cannot thank you enough for your honesty, your vulnerability, your candor, and your hilarity, and finally coming on the podcast. It took you a while.
I know, I appreciate so much, but you know what? It's a moment we now share.
It is
And
not
this was self-care for me. So I'm just happy that we got to do it.
awesome. So as I said, Kai has lots of really awesome things coming down the pike this spring, summer. Make sure you follow her on all of the social medias. As I said, I adore you, and I am so proud of you. And thank you so much for being part of 29 Days of Magic.
Thank you so much for doing this. Happy Black History Month to everyone. And can't wait to hear the other ladies you speak to.
Awesome. And that is our show.